Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to this week's Chasing Giants podcast, episode 259. This podcast will air on February 9th. Had to think about that for a minute. And we're back at it, Don. We took a week off, and then you were sick the week before, so it feels like a while since we've been on a normal podcast.
It has been at least, I missed 2 weeks. And I need to apologize to everybody that went to the Mount Hope show expecting to hear the sermon that I'd been plugging for weeks and weeks and trying to get people there. And, you know, nearly 1,000 people showed up, and then I didn't. And if you was one of those people, I definitely apologize for that. That is the first time ever that I've been scheduled at an event and did not make it. But folks, I was so sick and I didn't want to spread it to anybody. It ended up going to the doctor and got tested positive for influenza B. And I'm telling you what, that is some nasty stuff. And it's been 2 weeks and 5 days now since I first started getting sick, and I'm not over it yet. I'm probably 85%, but I'm not 100% yet. But, you know, we're going to make an effort to be back there next summer. We got that event in New York, and on our way to New York, we're going to try to stop in there at the same venue, work with Jason there at JB's Feed, our dealer there by Mount Hope. And those people that showed up and didn't get to hear my sermon, I'm going to save that sermon for that group of people. I'm not going to share it anywhere else until I get back to Mount Hope. That's a very special area for me because I've been going there literally since the early 90s to that area, and I've got a lot of friends there, just a ton of friends from that eastern Ohio area. So very special to me, and I really hated to miss it, but I'm going to do everything I can to make up for it this summer.
Well, it was. I'll be honest. It was one of the most stressful things that I ever had to pull off that late a notice, because we spent the day thinking that you could get home and actually still connect in virtually to where at least your screen was up and we could interact between the two. But you were so bad. You were horizontal, not even able to sit up. So I know I put our friend Ray Miller on the spot, and he still is giving me a hard time about it. I'll probably never hear the end of it, but we owe him a really big thank you. And I don't know, we tried to make the best of it, had a lot of people very understanding and very patient. But for those who had to fight through listening to just me talk, I apologize about that too, but we did the best we could.
Well, I listened to it on the road. I don't remember what day it was, but I had plenty of road time one day, and I listened to it. I think you guys did a great job, so I may have to get ready to replace me when I retire. Who knows how long that's going to be.
Well, it's not going to be anytime soon. I'm not going to let you, at least on that. And then last week we took the week off. We have only done that one other time in 259 weeks. And I was in Japan. You celebrated your daughter's 40th birthday and still were feeling bad. I know you still went on your trip, but we're still trying to recover. I'm betting that warm air probably helped you a little bit. But we took the week off, and I just put out a little message to get some information out about the Ship Shawana show that we're going to be talking about later. But did you wear shorts any while you were down in South Florida?
Well, I want to talk about that trip just a little bit because, well, first of all, when I got home from Ohio and I missed the Mount Hope show, I went right to the doctor. I knew I needed something, and that's when I got tested for influenza B, and they told me that I would only be contagious for about 5 days, and the day I got to the doctor was my 6th day of being sick. So I went ahead and went on the vacation. I actually wore a mask in the airport and on the airplane, and shocked both of my sons-in-law when they first seen me with a mask. They could not believe it. And I was the only person in either airport or on the plane with a mask. So I felt just a little bit out of place, but we flew into Key West, Florida. And I don't know if you've ever been to Key West, but if you haven't, don't ever go, because I seen more stinking rainbow flags in that place. I seen more freaks walking up and down the street. That place is absolutely evil. Folks, don't go to Key West, Florida. It is nothing but a homosexual hideout, rainbow flag waving, just freak show. Stay away from Key West, Florida. And actually, we did not stay there. We stayed about an hour away in Marathon, a different one of the islands, and it wasn't near as bad. We did one day drive back to Key West. I don't know, the women had some places they wanted to go, but by the time we got out of there, I'll tell you what, I was seeing rainbows for the next 24 hours. Do not go to Key West, Florida.
Well, you didn't go out on the beach with your shorts and your tank top on? I did not see a picture of that anywhere.
I did not go wear shorts. I did not go to the beach. But you know what, Terry? I was on my computer the other day, and I did find a picture of me on the beach in shorts from several years ago. And if you want, I'll send it to you, and you can post it on the website so people can know that, hey, one time I did wear shorts. It's been a long time. When you see the picture, you'll know that it's a long time. I didn't have this white on my beard. So
I just keep thinking about there was this episode of Duck Dynasty back years ago where the whole family, Willie took his whole family to Hawaii, and old man Phil gets to Hawaii and the family's all going to the beach and going snorkeling and everything. And Phil goes up and lays down on the bed and watches Jason Bourne marathon the entire trip because he doesn't want to go out to the beach. So
that sounds like me today. Absolutely. My kids were younger, I'd go out and play with them in the water a little bit and such. And today, my kids are 40 years old and 33 years old, so I'm not going to the beach. They can play with themselves today.
Well, but you were there celebrating Andrea's 40th birthday and having her here with us and healthy. That's something to celebrate and be thankful for, though, I know.
Yeah, amen. Definitely, she's definitely been a blessing, and I'm so proud of her and the way she lives her life and takes care of her family and has her priorities in order. So, real proud of her.
Yeah, this is just something to piggyback off Andrea. We started that Andrea Hamilton Fund for families navigating breast cancer. And at the event in Mount Hope, so 2 weeks ago, I guess, we learned of a family from that community that was having to go to Florida to get a similar treatment than Andrea got. So they were down there. And it ended up working out that the money we raised at the Mount Hope show was within like $600 of the cash payment for her entire treatment that wasn't covered by health insurance for her breast cancer. So it ended up being that event helped pay for that family to navigate this upcoming treatment that they're doing to navigate breast cancer. So I thought, it was within like $200 of the total that ended up everything working out. So that was kind of cool.
A good deal. It feels good to help other people. And we've often said on here, if you want to be blessed, be a blessing. And, you never know how you're going to be paid back. And a lot of times it's just the good feeling in your heart that you help someone else out that needed it, at a time when that family is facing some real challenges and uncertainty about their future. I have no idea if they've got young kids or whatever, but whenever you can help lift somebody up that's down in the dumps like that, it's a great feeling.
Yep. Well, again, thank you for everyone's patience and understanding as Dawn was sick and we took last week off. I just got back a day and a half ago experiencing some extreme jet lag. This is I was over there for 11 or 12 days, so I got fully acclimated on the other side, and man, I'm having a hard time coming back. I even took a sleeping pill last night and still woke up at 2:30 and then just feel completely hungover. So I'm struggling here so it's going to take a few days for me to feel normal. But we appreciate the understanding of a week off and Dawn being sick. So let's take a quick break. I want to talk about consulting and some things that we've been seeing, especially buck shedding and some stories from the field. And we need to talk about Ship Shawana because this last minute or the last final plans are coming together that we want to make sure everybody knows about if they're considering coming. So we'll be right back after a spot from our friends at Osseo.
Osseo Gear introduces a premium line of bow hunting gear that is unmatched, pairing nature's finest camouflage with the best technological innovations. Osseo Gear brings whitetail bow hunters the gear they need to be the best at their craft. The unique camouflage mimics the intricate feather pattern of North America's greatest predatory creatures. Designed for invisibility, built for comfort, and engineered for function. Visit OsseoGear.com. That's ASIO Gear.com to start shopping. Osseo Gear. Prepare to be invisible.
So, Don, on the consulting trail, you had to take a break and reschedule some visits, but since we've aired the last time, you have gotten a couple jobs done in some different places. Any cool takeaways, or did you find any sheds or anything like that while you've been out?
I'll tell you what, every day is just a blessing on the consulting trail because of the people you meet, the experience you see on a new property. Every property in North America is different. We did find one day in Ohio, found a couple sheds, met some great people on that trip too, just some fantastic people. I was on a property this week here in Illinois. Hey, man, you talk about a good one, Terry. This has got to be in the top 5% of all properties I've ever been on. So this property, I'm not even going to say the county because I don't want people to be searching Onyx to try to find it. But this property is 120 acres, but it's surrounded on 3 sides by a 10,000 acre, literally 10,000 acre no hunting sanctuary.
Wow.
And we're going to have about 40 acres of food on this farm, and it doesn't have much on it today, but it has the opportunity. There's an ag field that's being farmed, and it was plowed up when I was there this week, so no food there. And there's a CRP field that's getting ready to come out. The CRP contract's getting ready to expire the next year or so, and it's about a 15-acre field. We're going to have probably 40 acres of food and probably 100 or so fruit trees on this place, and surrounded by 10,000 acres of no hunting. I'm telling you, if this client does not kill booners every single year, it'll just shock me, because it's in a great county too. It's in a great part of the state. This county has produced lots and lots of 200s. So
and when
that
you don't
was
have,
pretty exciting.
When you don't have neighbors sitting your property line, he actually can control what deer live to the older age structure. That's the key that most people don't have.
Yeah, and I told him that, I said, you're going to want to be very careful about burning buck tags, because in the late season with all that food and all that territory, because the sanctuary area, it's got some ag fields on it, but they don't leave any food, anything standing. The fields were plowed. And I said, come late season, you're going to see bucks every single winter that you've never seen before. And yeah, a lot of them are not going to be big shooters, but there's going to be some show up every year that I suspect will be booners plus. So really excited to hear about that property.
Here's a question I got for you, Don. This is kind of getting sidetracked with what we decided we were going to talk about tonight, but you just mentioned something that made me think of it. We've talked about using fruit trees to, basically amplify attraction around stand sites and, make a staging area, putting in a small orchard. When you're going and walking a property and you see different opportunities, how do you decide how many fruit trees to use?
Well, a lot of it depends on the space that's available for food. If you're really limited, I don't think you want to burn up a bunch of acreage with fruit trees. Look for little pockets here and there where you can stick 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5 trees. That's really a little pocket that's not big enough for a food plot. And if you can create a good stand site there, that's where you're sticking the fruit trees. And there was another property that I did recently, and it's probably going to have 200 fruit trees on it. But every fruit tree planting that I'm putting on these plans is at 1 or 2 locations. It's either around the edge of a food plot, so it's just another food source at that same location that we're drawing deer to, or it's right in front of a stand site. So the stand is typically the stand site's already a really good stand site, but there's an opportunity because of some open cover where we could stick a couple or 3 or 4 fruit trees to make it even better. Give those deer just another reason to come by that stand site, and that's where these fruit trees come in. And these trees that these special varieties of apples that Jay Gingrich is selling, Gingrich Tree Farm. There's 4 of them: Rutmaster, Red Dawn, Jehovah's Choice, and Steady Eddie. The apple breeder Andy Andreas has worked on these trees for many, many years, and the root stock that determines how big that tree is going to be. So there's dwarf fruit trees, and there's semi-dwarf, and there's standard. Well, these trees are going to be giant fruit trees. They're not going to be little, 8-10 foot tall trees that produce a 5-gallon bucket of fruit. These trees are going to be 25, 30 feet tall, really broad, produce bushel baskets of fruit, once they get fully mature. And that's what I love about those trees. And they're also disease resistant. I mean, he's selecting, it's not even 1%. It's like 1/10 of 1% out of all the trees in his breeding program ever make it into production. So, I mean, very selective, disease resistance, but it's also the size of those trees. These are not going to be little wimpy fruit trees when they get grown. These are going to be big, giant fruit trees.
So these trees through Gingrich, how far apart are you planting those when you lay out your grid and your plan?
We're keeping them 30 feet apart, and to be honest, they may need to be 35 feet. I mean, 30 feet, I'm going to guess that when they're fully mature, they're going to either be just about touching or maybe even touching on their outer branches. So
normally when I lay out a grid, I keep them at 10 to 12 yards apart. So it's
that's about right.
Yeah, unless you're trying to make like a shooting lane. If you got it near an orchard, you space it out where you can shoot down it. But yeah, it's I definitely don't try to crunch it any lower than that. And then always putting clover. I always put clover at the base of them. You might as well double dip your food source underneath of them. So
yep.
All right, well, sorry for getting sidetracked on that. Let's talk a little bit about Ship Shawana.
Coming this February to the Michiana Event Center in Ship Shawana, Indiana, the FAE Midwest Sportsman Classic. Thursday, February 13th through Saturday, February 15th. Come see the Whitetail Legends Classic with Bobby Worthington, Don Higgins, Al Foster, Joe Miles, Gene Winsell, Barry Winsell, and moderator Terry Peer.
We started shooting arrows. Here we are pushing 80 years old, and we haven't put our toys away yet. I say, like, these lights really brighten my eyes, and I know what the buck felt like that Don Higgins got last year right before he pulled the trigger.
When I got to hunting the whitetail deer later on, I realized I was hunting the number one prey animal in the world, the most difficult animal in the world to kill. Before that week was over, my heart was broken because I found out they had a naked man in their room. True story.
Whitetail bucks aren't supposed to be easy. A mature whitetail buck, he's the top of the line. I mean, he's the top challenge in the archery world, and it's supposed to be a close range sport.
I think that there's too many deer hunters out there that are trying to improve their success through their equipment instead of their woodsmanship skills.
Don't miss the Chasing Giants live podcast on Thursday night. Brian Dickinson, the author of Blind Descent, on stage Friday and Saturday. Mark Zona, the Hall of Fame angler, will be live on Thursday and Friday to show you how legends catch big fish. Also in this year's Unmatched speaker lineup, Terry Hodges, the legendary game warden and author of the thrilling Warden Force series. Team Radical on big game hunting and predator calling. Andy Andreas on fruit trees for wildlife. Smokey from Smokey's Deer Lures. And James Watson, Ross Robertson, and Mike Raber rounding out our next level fishing lineup. Thousands of dollars in attendee giveaways. Guns, a double drop hunting blind, a fishing trip, Osseo camo, kayak, and more. Find a full show schedule at MidwestSportsmanClassic.com. Tickets available at the door. February 13th, 14th, and 15th.
For more information, go to MidwestSportsmanClassic.com.
By the time people hear this, it's going to be just a few days before this show in northern Indiana. Derek told me today they've even put booths out in the walkway around the arena because they ran out of floor space in the show hall. So I think it's up around 200 vendors are going to be there, and some of our really good friends as well.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm going up a couple days early to Michigan. I've got a couple properties I want to look at up there, consult on, and even during the days of the show, those mornings, I'm going to be looking at some local properties and getting to the show after lunch. But yeah, looking forward to it. I want to mention that we've talked about the auction that we're going to have. So my 2 books that are out of production, sold out. I've stashed a few copies of each. And we're going to auction these off with 100% of the proceeds going to Lester's feet. That'll be Thursday night when you and I do the live Chasing Giants podcast. And then also my Matthews bow and your Matthews bow, brand new lift.
The bows we shot our bucks with this year.
Yep, absolutely. So this is the bow that I would have got back in October, right before the release of this Lift X. This is the bow I shot Zacchaeus with. Got the quiver on it, got the rest on it. I mean, it's ready to go. I did take my old 1960 stuff of it, though, because I can't buy them anymore, so I'm keeping that. But
and Don does not use a peep sight, so you will have to put your peep sight in if you want it. Mine's fully decked out. Mine will have everything but arrows, so my sight and rest will go with it. And mine is not a Lift X. Mine is actually just a lift. So. Did Derek say we were doing it Thursday night during the podcast? Is that when the auction is?
That's when I thought, but I could be wrong. I think that's when it is.
I'm pretty sure it is. If that is wrong, I will put that information in here. I'm not 100% sure, but that auction is going to be live. They've arranged for an auctioneer to come in. All of those proceeds go 100% to Lester's feet. Matthews was absolutely ecstatic. I talked to our friends over there about what we were going to do with our bows this year, and they were ecstatic that we were able to do that. And then Lester's Feet is actually going to have an additional package there for the folks that are going to be at the show. So make sure that you stop by the Lester's Feet booth and get a list of all the things that we're offering, and we'll draw at the event for a winner there. There will be a bow in that also. So a lot of big things, but I'm trying to think of all of Joe Miles is going to have his Osseo booth there. Brenton is going to have and they're going to have the display of our new Osseo wrapped Brenton rifle on display in the booth. These things look absolutely phenomenal. You'll be able to see my new gun there. Jay Gingrich, I believe. 360 has a dealer there. Real World has 1 or 2 dealers there. Jay Gingrich is there. Is that right?
Yep. Mike's Mighty Micros is going to be there. I didn't realize that till I seen a post on social media this week.
Yep. Trying to think of anybody else. Vortex always has a couple dealers there. So almost all of our sponsors are represented. Even Chris Yates will have 2 trucks in the parking lot, even though he's not going to have a booth there.
Yes, he will.
But he'll have 2 Duramaxes on site. But even all of our friends, Coonless Feeders, Austin Razor will have stock inventory of his new Coonless high-capacity deer feeder there. Our friend Clint Cross, I just talked to him. He's the one that builds the John Deere planters. He's going to have parts and planters there. So it's amazing how many people jumped in, and I know I'm forgetting friends that are going to send me a message and say, why didn't you talk about us? But I'll forget somebody no matter how far on I go. But it's kind of cool to see how many of the people that we've considered family in this industry jumped in and put a booth in the show.
Yeah, and the 360 is going to release a new product, unveil a new product. Is that going to be during our podcast?
That will. So brand new product. Evening. We will unveil that during our live podcast, and then that unit will be on display outside of the show. So if you don't come Thursday for the live podcast, make sure you check it out as you walk in. You'll be able to see the new release of a new product that 360 is coming out with. So we're really excited about all this. They're doing something a little bit different each day. The feedback we got from last year is there wasn't enough time to spend with guys like Bobby and the Winsel brothers and Al Foster. So they're breaking it up into modules. And then Friday night's show is going to be Campfire Stories with the Winsel brothers. And I'm supposed to moderate these two jokers, and I don't know how I'm supposed to keep them two on track when it comes to storytelling, but I think I'm just going to let it fly on that one. But then at the end of that event, we're going to bring all of the legends out on the stage for a short segment and have a very pointed time of questions that is going to be a real big takeaway, I think, for everybody in the arena. So there's a schedule. If you need to find that, go to look at it on the website. If you can't find or don't have access to internet, there's a number that you can call. Please call that. But you're not going to want to. It's stacked with all different types of guest speakers and seminars, and it's not just us that are there. There's a guy who climbed Mount Everest. There's professional fishermen. Our friends from Team Radical are doing elk hunting and predator hunting. So I think there's something for everybody, and I like it because there's so many hunting related vendors there versus what hunting shows have tended to turn into.
Yeah, it'll be a good time for sure. Bigger and better than ever.
All right. Well, we wasted a lot of time with all of that. Let's move on to our Higgins on the hot seat question for this week. And Don, this one I'm not sure how you're going to answer. And it's not a spoof or trying to be funny. It's just kind of just brutal honesty. I think that you've seen both sides of it, the good and the bad. But for the Higgins hot seat brought to you by 360 Blinds, Don, my question is, using or having your cell phone in the blind with you, is it a good thing or bad thing? Because we've all gotten to the point that we work, we answer emails, text messages, surf social media, but I think I had it happen 2 or 3 years ago. It probably cost me a shot at $1. Is it a good thing or a bad thing to be able to have your cell phone compared to the old days where you just sat there and paid attention?
Well, I can tell you there's been a lot of bucks saved because of hunters on their cell phone and didn't see the buck coming in until it was too late. So I think there's both good and bad. From my perspective, one of the better things about having your cell phone with you is that, like on a morning hunt, I can sit a whole lot longer when I'm playing on my phone. If I don't have a phone to play with, I get bored after a while, like anybody, I guess. But with that cell phone in my hand, I can sit there for hours, and I won't be on it continually. I'll put it in my pocket, and it'll just be hunting for 30 minutes, and then pull it out and play with it for 10 or 15, throw it back in my pocket, check my text messages, who knows what might be going on at home or whatever where I'm needed. I think it's both good and bad. In a lot of ways, I yearn for the old days. I was just thinking about this one day this week when I was driving that, I remember back when before cell phones, before trail cameras, before food plots, where I had people, some guy sent me a phone message this week. A guy from northern Indiana had just ripped into me for using trail cameras. And it's like, man, I'd like to debate this guy in public. But anyway, I kind of yearn for those days when you just went hunting, you read sign, you had to pick your stand site not based on what your trail camera showed you, not based on a food plot where you was pulling these, or even a bait pile where you're pulling these deer in, but you're scouting. I don't scout nothing like I used to. It's just not necessary. The trail cameras are pretty much doing it for me. And then also I've gotten where I can read the terrain. I know where to put my stand. If there's a shooter buck in the area, my trail camera tells me there's a shooter buck in the area, I can figure out pretty easy where to kill him, provided that, the property's not pressured too much. I don't know. I take my cell phone with me. I never leave it at home, so I guess it's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it allows us to stay longer, but I think it can be a distraction when we need it to be. I think which buck was it? Was it last year's?
As Babe.
Babe, where you were texting Andrea and
Yep.
the buck. I mean, you still got the buck, but it could have been, if you wouldn't have typed that message as fast as you did, it could have been a different story at the end.
I was 3 seconds away from not getting a shot at that deer, probably less than 3 seconds. So if I'd have kept looking at my phone for 3 more seconds, that buck would have got past me.
Yeah. But I think about how much longer I can sit in the stand. You know, the guys like me that have to work and answer emails, you know, the amount of time that we can spend in, it's a kind of a catch-22. I guess it's pick your battles of when you're on it and when you're not. And especially, you know, when you're on a 360 overlooking a big food plot, it's a little bit different than down in a rut funnel where it can happen really, really quick. So I guess it depends on the spot too.
I want to throw out a challenge. The guy that called and left me the message on my phone this week, giving me a hard time about he can't believe somebody in my position is using cell cameras to hunt deer. Please come to the podcast on Thursday night and ask a question about that. Please do that. I want to debate you. Friendly debate. I'm not going to be mad, and we'll shake hands at the end, but I'll bet you that I can point out a few things to make you rethink that your position.
I'll even give you a free Chasing Giants hat if you show up. How about that?
I hope he does.
Ever had a terrible real estate experience? Average realtors usually spend more time selling themselves than on selling your land. They'll tell you anything to get the listing. They know that if they get the listing, you're stuck with them. Not here. Midwest Land Group has changed the way land is sold and is the only brokerage to offer a 100% satisfaction guarantee. That means if we don't meet your expectations, you can fire us. That puts all the pressure on us to perform. We don't just list land, we sell it. If you're looking to buy or sell property, don't before you talk to us. Visit us at MidwestLandGroup.com.
All right, the first one comes from Royce Corbin from Plano, Illinois. It says, Don and Terry, I recently came across an internet expert promoting the use of grain sorghum as bedding instead of switchgrass. He had a list of arguments promoting sorghum, price, fast establishment, and more. I think I already know your answer to this, but thought it might help clarify to others considering this practice. Thanks for the response, and hopefully this doesn't raise the blood pressure. Well, it's not going to raise my blood pressure. I mean, the real world's selling a grain sorghum blend. Go buy a bunch of it and plant the whole county, and then you see how many deer you have bedding in. But I think I know the video that they're talking about. I think the guy makes some valid points. You get out in the plain states, you know, Kansas and the Dakotas and that, grain sorghum, there's a lot of deer that bed in those grain sorghum fields. But, you know, and when you get into the heart of the Midwest, it's a different story, in my opinion. Well, first of all, grain sorghum's an annual. You're going to have to plant it every single year. So all the nonsense about it's cheaper and this and that. No, over a 10-year period, it's not cheaper. You plant switchgrass one time, and that's it for the rest of your life. You got a switchgrass patch. Grain sorghum, you got to replant every year. You got to put the chemical on every year. You got to have the fuel in your tractor every year. So it is not cheaper. Another thing that I disagree with, I don't like having my food and my bedding mixed up together. So a buck that's bedding in a grain sorghum field, he can just stand up and start eating the heads off of that grain sorghum. So why does he need to move out to the edge where you're sitting there waiting? The other thing is, I don't think a smaller patch of grain sorghum, just like a smaller patch of switchgrass, is a good bedding location. I think you need bigger fields of it. If you've got, you know, a 10-acre field, that's one thing. You could have deer readily bedding in it, where if you got a small 2 or 3 acre patch, I just don't believe they're going to bed in it to the degree they will those bigger patches. So, yeah, I think the guy made some valid points. I know deer bed in it. Know out in the plain states where cover is more limited, you know, they just don't have the big woods out there that we typically do. You have the little tree lines that follow creeks and and ravines and such. I think that there's some positives, but there's plenty of negatives also. In my opinion, it does not come close to switchgrass for bedding cover.
I think there's probably two things you've stood firm on, and this is me speaking for you, so please interrupt me if I say I'm wrong. The switchgrass, the winter standability of it, you're not going to get that with grain sorghum, in the brutal, brutal winter. But number two, if that buck, like you just mentioned, but I want you to elaborate on it, if that buck stands up, a mature buck, sometimes we get maybe last window of shooting light to be able to shoot that deer because he comes in at last light. And if he's got a chance to nibble on anything as he stands up and gets out of his bed and delays that, he's coming into that as you're climbing out of your stand. I mean, you have preached this a long time. You want the first time he's able to nip something as far as a food source to be within bow range.
Absolutely. And, I think some of these videos, I know a lot of these videos are nothing but clickbait. It's people trying to come up with something different to get, people to click on and watch the video. And that's what I see with this. I mean, granted, the guy does make some good points. Deer do like to bed in grain sorghum or milo, but it's not near as good as switchgrass for the reasons that we went over here.
Yep. All right, well, we beat that horse to death. Let's go to the second question.
This one comes from J.C. Witt from Middletown, Ohio. It says, Don, first off, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom through the years I've been listening to the podcast. I have two questions. One, what's the difference between a timber harvest and an aggressive TSI cut? Number two, I've heard you talk about not shed hunting until later in the early spring to keep pressure off your property. So my question is, what's the difference between going onto a consultant's property? I'm going to guess it's not a consultant, but a consulting client's property with multiple people, landowner and sons or buddies during hunting season, and walking all over that property, potentially running off mature bucks to get shot on neighboring properties, or being in there shed hunting. I don't shed hunt myself until right before green up starts. Just wanted to see if I could get a tiny rant out of you. Well, it's funny how people want to see me go on rants. Well, you should go back and listen to the beginning of this podcast where I talk about Key West, Florida, if you want to hear a rant. But as far as, that goes, when these properties that I'm consulting on are not properties that have had the habitat work done. They're properties that need work. They're not a finished product yet. And we're in there for a day to get the plan laid out and doing it in the wintertime so that the client has from that point until typically spring green up to get in there and do habitat work. Years ago when I was developing my property in the wintertime, I was, in my sanctuary area a lot more than I am today. What I'm talking about when I talk about staying out as far as shed hunting and things, it's a property that's already finished. It's a property that all the habitat projects are done. There's no need to be going in there just for the sake of looking for antlers. If those antlers fall in there, they're still going to be there come spring. Yeah, they may get chewed on a little bit, but you go in and you run the buck off and he goes and sheds on your neighbor. So what's that gain you? And the first question, what was the first question? Oh, it was about TSI versus timber harvest. Well, a timber harvest is where you're logging the timber to cut the trees down and taking the logs out for lumber. That's a timber harvest. A TSI stands for Timber Stand Improvement. And what that is going in and killing the trees that are never going to have timber value. So trees of species that just aren't valuable, beech, locust, hackberry, just a soft list of them. Yeah, soft maple, cottonwood, sycamores. You're going in with a TSI cut and you're getting rid of those trees that are never going to have, high timber value. And then you're leaving the trees that will. They're smaller trees, but they're of good species and good branch structure that one day they will have value, as timber. So that's the difference in a timber harvest and a timber stand improvement.
And then there's another level of the timber harvest pretty much called a clear cut. Explain that.
Yep. Yeah, clear cuts when they go in and they just cut everything. And a lot of times when they do that, they're using all those trees as pulpwood so that those trees are just ground up, and well, that's how they make paper for one thing, but they can make chipboard and just all kinds of other different products. But I like clear cuts. In fact, my business partners and I just bought a 383-acre property in Ohio that was clear cut some years ago, probably I'm going to guess 10 years or so ago. And man, that is a thick, nasty, gnarly mess. It is a deer heaven. The vining honeysuckle is growing up on the young tree saplings and such. And you talk about prime bedding cover, and that started as a clear cut. So when you clear cut, you're getting that sunlight on the ground, and you're just promoting all kinds of weeds and woody vegetation, and just all kinds of plant vegetation, high stem count, just prime bedding area.
So when you make the comment that the guy cannot cut it too hard, you're referring more towards a clear cut than even TSI or timber harvest.
Yeah, so a lot of times on these plans, when I look at a property, and it varies because every timber is a little bit different. But I'll tell the client, have a logger come in and cut every tree that he wants. I don't know what his standard's going to be, whether it's 16-inch diameter or 12-inch or what, but have him come in and have him take every tree that he wants and make him take the bad species or the less valuable species. Don't just let him come in and take your white oaks and your walnuts. I don't care what they tell you. If they want those white oaks and walnuts bad enough, they'll take the bigger cottonwoods and maples and such too. Make them take all the species. And then when they get done, you go in and do your aggressive TSI, where all the trees that are left that are less valuable species or they don't have good branch structure, you cut all them down too. And the only thing you're leaving are like young oaks and young walnuts that have good branch structure. And you're letting a lot of sunlight in, but you're also cutting down the competition for those trees you're leaving. Those nice oaks and walnuts that you're leaving, you're clearing, the canopy around them so they can grow a whole lot quicker. They don't have the competition. So not only are you helping your future timber harvest, you're also creating some great deer cover by letting that sunlight in.
And with all of that material that gets left on the ground, then that's when you can take your skid loader or your tractor in and pile up, big piles that we call barriers on our plans to help funnel deer a little bit tighter on saddles or rut funnels or wherever, where we can get them a little bit closer to when we're bow hunting to get them within bow range.
Yep. So there's the difference between TSI and timber harvest. Hey, before we answer the next question, I want to talk about my T-shirt here.
Oh, there you go.
We the people, keeping the herd healthy. A good friend of mine, Chris Jordy from North Dakota, owns Hart J Outfitters. If you're looking to hunt North Dakota, he's your guy. But he sent me this T-shirt. They're fighting a bunch of ridiculous CW regulations and laws out there, and they're pretty well organized and doing a good job doing battle with their state game agency. So I want to thank Chris for the T-shirt and wish him and the other sportsmen in North Dakota the best of luck as they fight the political disease known as CWD.
Right.
Next one comes from Adam Cates from Gardner, Kansas. Says, Don, I hear other land consultants talk about a green to grain transition in a food plot, enhancing that with a pinch and or a scrape. Just curious about your thoughts on this. Thank you and God bless. Well, Adam, I think it works, no doubt about it. So when you get different types of cover coming together, that attracts the deer. You can have a wooded edge that, butts right up to an open field or an ag field or whatever, grass field. And those edges, deer, whitetails are creatures of the edge. And you're creating an edge in the food plot. So you might have a soybean plot that butts up to a deadly dozen plot. And that spot where the two plots meet is right in front of your stand. And what makes it so great is not only did you create an edge, but a deer just doesn't want to sit out there and eat soybeans all day, or he just doesn't want to eat greens all day. So he'll go back and forth, from one plot to the other. And when he does, he's going to be crossing right in front of your stand. And you can even enhance that a little bit more with a scrape, I'm not a big fan of these guys planting posts and out in their plot and then hanging a branch from it and all that. And I know it works to some degree, but I would much rather go out there and plant a burlapped pin oak tree, and that tree is just going to stay alive and it's going to take root and it's going to grow. And the pin oak has a branching structure where the branches, instead of angling upward, they angle straight out and even a little bit downward, and makes great trees for scrapes. I would rather plant a tree, and I've done that a couple spots on my farm. I'd rather plant a pin oak tree, 20 yards from my stand or my blind, than cutting a tree down and going out there with post hole jobbers and cutting and digging a little hole and sticking that thing in it. And then you go back and the buck has ripped it clear out of the ground because it's not very solid, and it's just not something that I practice or promote. The next one comes from Mike Carey from Evans Mills, New York. He says, "Hi, Don and Terry. It's awesome how you guys help us landowners and listeners that may have a little slice of heaven, but maybe can't afford to have one of you guys out to give us hands-on advice. Very unselfish of you to give free advice weekly. Question, Don, do you believe all your years in the captive deer industry helped you immensely in your great success with your whitetail adventures, i.e. learning the ways of the animal as a whole carried over into your hunting career? I have had a herd for about 25 years, and by watching the actions of my bucks, that tells me when it's time to really get at it in my hunting, and have had great success by not going into my best areas that I may have a target buck scoped out. Thanks for all you guys do. God bless. P.S. Would be proud to wear one of those great tees up here in upstate New York on the Canadian border. It's freaking cold. Go Trump." Well, Mike, you're going to get a chance to wear one of those T-shirts because we picked your question. But as far as the captive deer, I'm going to make a statement here that's going to rub some people the wrong way, but I truly believe that it's accurate and true. I think the typical captive deer farmer is way more knowledgeable about whitetails than even an experienced hunter. Being around those animals every single day, you just can't help but pick up things. And absolutely, my years of experience with captive deer absolutely made me a better hunter. And probably not in the ways you described or the ways people would think. A perfect example, I think, is with the seasonal differences in how these deer feed. So, in late summer, let's say August and September, a deer is literally going to consume about 3 to 4 times more feed than he's going to be consuming in the winter months of, say, December and January and February. Literally 3 to 4 times as much. And I think back to one year I had, a handful of bucks in a pen. I don't remember how many was in there. But in the late summer and early fall, I was taking 2 full 5-gallon buckets of feed to those bucks, and that's about what they would eat every day. They'd clean up 2 5-gallon buckets. So every day that's what they got. That same group of bucks, very same animals, in December and January were eating less than 1 bucket. I'd take 1 bucket out there, and some days I'd go back the next day, and 90% of the food from the day before was still there. So they went from eating 2 full 5-gallon buckets to less than 1. And some days they probably didn't even eat a quarter of 1. And it's Mother Nature's way of protecting these animals, because in the fall, when they're really consuming a lot of food, that's when the food is most bountiful in their range. The acorns are falling from the trees, the soft mast, apples, persimmons, pears, whatever. That's when that's available. The ag crops, the corn, soybeans, whatever, that's when that's available. So Mother Nature is geared, God, whenever he designed these critters, he designed them to put on fat in the fall when food is plentiful, gorging themselves with food, and they're putting on fat for the winter. And then in the winter, when food is scarce, he's slowed down their metabolism where they don't require near as much food. It's almost like a bear going into hibernation where he's not eating all winter. Well, these deer don't go into hibernation, but their metabolism slows way, way, way down. And, I can sit here and tell you about that today, because I witnessed it firsthand. There's no way that without that experience, I would appreciate how much less a deer eats in the winter than he does in the late summer, early fall. And that's just one of many, many examples. And, some of the things that I've seen these deer do, another crazy thing that I've seen, you guys hear me bashing dogs all the time on here. Dogs are the worst thing for a hunting property. Well, they literally are the worst. So they're worse than coyotes. They are the worst thing. And when I had the captive deer, I watched those deer see a coyote, outside their pen, walking across the field or something, and how those deer reacted to that coyote. They were alert. They kept their eye on that coyote. But if there was a dog in that same location as that coyote, those deer were absolutely flipping out, running to the other side of the pen, sometimes bouncing off the fences and whatever. They absolutely hate dogs, and it doesn't need to be a big dog. It can be a little chihuahua, a little lap dog. That's enough to send those deer and it doesn't matter how tame those deer are. They could be bottle-raised captive deer that you can walk out in the pen and pet, and they see you come into their pen, they come running, looking for a treat, sniffing in your pocket or whatever. But once there's a dog around, it's a totally, totally different ball game. So I learned that from the captive deer, and I could just go on and on and on. Little things that I've noticed during the 20 years plus that I had those captive deer that's helped me become a better hunter.
Yeah. It's interesting, the nuances of, it's like raising any animal. It's no different than cattle, or it's the interaction that you have with them every day that brings it just to a new level. Their mannerisms, their vocalizations. That's the thing that I picked up on more when I was around. You sold them. How long has it been since you've had them?
I have not had captive deer for 8 years now.
Yeah. So, the vocalizations that you get to hear, that was the cool thing for me. So it's being around them every day in a farm atmosphere. I think you can learn a lot, no doubt about it.
I'll share another story from the captive deer side of things. So the first 2 deer I got were 2 little bottle fawns. They were 2 little doe fawns that we were bottle feeding, and I had them in a section of our shed. It was basically a cattle shed, but they was in a stall in there. Fairly sizable stall, but I had some straw back in the back, where those fawns would bed. And the 2 fawns were named Abby and Annie. That's what we named them first 2 doe fawns. And they had ear tags in their ears, so we could tell them apart. But when I would go in there to bottle feed those 2 fawns, they would always be bedded in the 2 back corners. Each one would pick a corner at the back of that stall where they would bed. And here's the crazy thing. So they were in there pretty much all summer as they were fawns, and we were bottle feeding them. And we was feeding them, we would start out feeding them 4 times a day, and we'd do that for about a month, and we'd go down to 3 times a day, then we'd go down to 2 times a day, and then once a day as we weaned them off. But all those times going in that pen, which is, at least 200 or 300 times to bottle feed those deer, every single time Annie was in the same corner. Every single time Abby was in her corner. They never flopped corners. They always went to their respective corners. And that got me to thinking, I think that some of these deer, and wild deer's not going to bed in the same bed every day. It's just not going to happen. That doesn't fit their lifestyle in the wild. But I do believe that when an individual deer is using a certain part of his range and the wind direction's from a certain direction, he's probably got a favorite place that he's going to bed under those conditions. The next day, the wind might switch or whatever, and he beds somewhere else. But I think under certain conditions, the deer will go to the same spot to bed time after time after time.
We saw that with Smokey.
Absolutely. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, Smokey liked one. It was like, what do you call it? More of a swell or a drainage down through your switchgrass field, and I'm guessing he was on the bank somewhere of that topography. And when we had that wind, he came out of that area. Like you said, I don't think he's laying in the same little GPS coordinate spot. Maybe not, but I don't think it's down to that level. But he definitely liked that spot when the wind was blowing that way.
I do think that there's some deer. Now, they're not going to bed an exact bed every single day, but I do think that there's some deer that have a specific bed where they return and bed there multiple days.
Yeah, interesting. All right, let's get our last one up on the screen.
This one comes from Josh Combs from Columbia City, Indiana. Says, hey, Don and Terry, love everything you guys do for the hunting community. From the Faith First Hunting and Lester's Feed Helping Others, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. My question has to do with fences. Being deer are a natural resource, do either of you believe that states' agencies could step in and put limitations such as length, height, number of sides, or stop fences altogether? I myself own and hunt small properties. As I am working towards a larger place to hunt, it is still hard envision seeing high fences around my property or driving around and seeing high fences along fields, roads, and tree lines. I am torn on the matter. I don't want the government to tell me what I can do on my own property, but understand the amount of time, money, and effort people put into their property. Interested in your guys' perspective. Thanks and God bless. Well, Josh, I think that there could be states that try to do some sort of limit on fences, but I just don't see it standing up in court for multiple reasons. So where does it stop? Are you going to tell me that an airport cannot put a deer-proof fence around the airport to keep deer off the runway? Are you going to tell me that some little old lady can't put a fence around her garden to keep the critters from coming in and eating it? Are you going to tell me that a vineyard or an orchard cannot put a fence around their crop to protect it from deer? Where does it end? So, and I think maybe in the state of Iowa, you cannot put a 8-foot fence or a fence over a certain height on the property line. So guess what? You back off the property line 5 feet and you put it up. Then what are they going to do? I mean, you take this to court and you challenge it with some of these different examples that I've given you, and there's a whole lot more. I don't think it can stand up, just like I don't believe a ban on trail cameras can stand up, because who's to say that that's not a security camera? You're going to tell me that a private landowner on his own property cannot have a security camera? Well, are you going to tell that to every business owner in North America? So I don't think, and I'm not, I get it, I wish we didn't have to have fences. But in my opinion, the reason that we have fences and the reason we're going to have a lot more fences is because the state game agencies do such a pathetic, poor job of managing the resource. You got just an army of hunters out there who desire to hunt a well-managed resource. And then we've also got a bunch of hunters that don't care. They just want to shoot deer. Well, you can't have it both ways. I mean, you could if they had the right regulations, but no state seems to care that much. No state, even states like Iowa, who I would say probably has the best deer herd right now, even they really don't care about quality deer management. You can see it in their regulations. Yeah, they do some things right, but they could do a whole lot better if they really wanted to. And it's that battle that a private landowner, he has to fight the state regulations that all his neighbors are operating under. And so the fence comes into play. I get it. A guy spends literally millions of dollars on a property and maintaining that property, planting his food plots, doing his work, and it's a labor of love for him. He's out there 12 months out of the year either hunting or doing the habitat projects. And then the neighbor next door doesn't even hunt, but he lets some guy that's got zero invested, gives him hunting permission, and what's that guy do? He sits right on the property line to shoot the deer that the other guy has spent his lifetime creating habitat for. Now, I understand the frustration, but the blame for all this needs to go right to the state game agencies for their poor management.
No, I think it's one of those things that there's no right or wrong answer. It's up to the person that's doing it, but legally, it ain't gonna happen. So.
I wish we didn't have to have fences. I mean, I wish the state game agencies would see the value in a well-managed deer herd. The value is not in the deer herd itself, although it has some value. The real value is in a well-managed deer herd. I would love to take any state's deer herd and manage it for quality, and I promise you the income that state could make from that deer herd would skyrocket compared to what mismanaged deer herd.
Yep. All right. Well, we only have 5 questions for tonight. Thanks for those who sent them in. We will be doing a live podcast next week. So 2 things, guys. If you're coming to the event Thursday night, be prepared to ask a question. We will have it recorded, but there's usually the way we set it up is 2 microphones. There's one microphone where you're not on camera, and then another microphone where you might be on camera. So for those folks who don't want to be seen, we can be respectful of that. But then also, if you have ideas for Higgins on the hot seat questions for later on in the future, write them down on a piece of paper and drop them off at the Lester's Feet booth. I won't be there the entire show. I have other responsibilities at the show, but drop them off. My wife, my daughter, my son-in-law, Dan and Haley, we got all the board that's going to be there. They will collect them, and I will strategically use them throughout the year to have the Higgins hot seat. Maybe some days fire him up, maybe some days make him laugh. You're never going to know. But so you got consulting to do this week on the way there, and what else you got?
That's pretty much it this week. Going to visit a couple properties in Michigan, and I got one not far from the show in Ship Shawana, and that's pretty much going to take my week.
I got 2 plans I need to get caught up for that I've already done, and then I have one that I'm doing early in the week. So, and then I hit it hard again afterwards. If you are considering consulting, make sure you give Don a call. Schedules are a little lean, but we do have standby lists and put you on those in case someone cancels. You never know. So give us a call. We'll talk to you. We put a lot of work in these plans, don't we? It's not just walking the property. If I could count how many hours I was behind a computer screen on these things, I'd probably be a little depressed.
On Monday, I took a stack of plans to the mailbox, and I mean that stack of plans was so heavy I couldn't even carry it. It was literally a big giant stack of plans. And you know what amazes me is every time you get on social media, there's another consultant out there, but every year the demand for our services just grows and grows and grows. And we appreciate that, folks. The support you've given us is definitely appreciated. We do our best to accommodate folks. We try to string our visits together so that we're being efficient with our time. And, this winter I've had, 2 bouts of, I just had the influenza B, and I was sick back in December. Then I had the trip to the hospital for a couple days. And I'm still going to do my best. I think I can get everyone on my list done by spring. So you're going to have to be a little bit patient with me. I may be a little bit later in the winter than I planned on, but I still have every intention to get into everyone on my list.
Yep. Well, for everybody else, we will see you in Ship Shawana live on Thursday night. I hope that you can come and visit us, stop by one of the booths. You told me that Joe Johnson, of course, Al's going to be part of the event, but Joe's coming back and hanging out with us all week. So you get to say hi to all the guys and spend time with us. So we really look forward to that. Ty Miller is going to be doing our Sunday night prayer time at the conclusion of the podcast. He's going to be around also. A lot of the Chasing Giants TV guys will be there. So we got a lot going on. It's exciting, but we look forward to it.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.
Welcome to another Sunday night prayer time. I'm blessed to get an opportunity to share with you a devotion that I really didn't plan on writing, but it kind of wrote itself, as many of them do. I am responsible for providing a devotion to a men's closed circle basketball group that meets. We meet once a week and play. A lot of them are a lot younger than me at this point in my career, quote unquote. But I had one written, and I was supposed to be doing a devotion this last Tuesday, and something unfolded in our community, in a local city close to us, that for whatever reason rocked the world of a lot of the people that I'm around. My 6 a.m. men's Bible study talked about it for a long time. My boss just was floored by it, and it changed her whole perspective. Has really impacted how she walks around, and not to delve into the specifics of the story, but at a local grocery store, a gentleman chose to end the life of a cashier, a young cashier. She was like 18, 19 years old, one of the managers, and just, it was an ugly, ugly scene. But it prompted some discussions in the days leading up to the night I was going to give this devotion, and it caused me the night prior to just kind of really change, because I had been having to answer the question that a lot of us dread. And that question is, why do bad things happen to good people? We hear it a lot with the beginning, with a little addition, and that is, if God loves us, why does he let bad things happen to good people? And I really think it's oftentimes not a genuine, it's a disingenuous question, or some people looking to get a got you, but I think all of us at some point in our life have screamed up to God and asked why. When we're going through tragedy, when we lose someone, when pain is of a level that we just can't handle, when something so tragic happens that we just don't understand, we scream and we yell, and our why implies, why are you letting this happen, God? And I think the why do bad things happen to good people prompted 3 takeaways, and I'd like to share those with you tonight. The first is, let's look at that first part. Why do bad things happen? And I think we have to go all the way back to when God created us. I know we have to go all the way back there. Because you see, God did something that changed everything. And that is the simple fact that when he created us, he actually chose to limit his power upon us in the creation of which he had just made, by giving us free will. By giving us the choice, by giving us the ability of free will, by that we get to feel love, true love, empathy, forgiveness, compassion, joy. But we also get to feel pain, evil, sin. People choose to do evil. So we know deep down, we know the answer to the first part of the question, but it's much easier for us to try to use God as a scapegoat, as the blame, if you will. We always are looking to blame something or blame someone, because I think in our mind it's easier. We can separate ourselves from it. But I don't know about you. I know every time I've chosen to speak in anger towards someone, I've given into lust, I've given into temptation. Every time that I have chosen that, I have rejected God in those moments. He has tried to intervene, and I have chosen to not do as I was created to do. You see, we were created with a purpose, and it's inspired by God to love, to be good. But we have the choice. I can shake someone's hand. I can walk up and embrace them with my hand, or I can roll my fingers into a fist and I can deck them. It is not God's fault if I choose evil. That would be a disingenuous blame to place upon him. So we know that. And as I delved into this and I was praying on this and I was looking things up, I ran across a quote from a evangelist, and it was an unnamed evangelist, but the response that he had to the question, why do bad things happen to good people, was so short, but so deep. Somebody posed a question to him and he said it happened once, and he volunteered. I hang on. What are you saying? What do you mean? Only one person has ever walked this earth that was wholly good. W-H, holy. Deep down, you, me, we all realize that we are anything but good. Ever since the fall, mankind as a whole, Ty Miller as the man before you, has proven so efficient, so proficient. I'm so good at something that I would label me, I am a professional at it. And that is unfortunately sinning. I prove every single day that this collection of flesh and bones cannot live a sinless day. At times I can't even live a sinless minute. But the beauty is that despite the fact that we are rebelling against that which we were created to be, and we are not good, God still calls us to be part of His plan, calls us to be with Him. That's a grace. That is when grace pours in and changes our lives and draws us into Him and attracts us to that. So unfortunately, bad things, if we're honest, we know bad things, tragedies, unfortunate things, they're not happening to good people. They're happening to fellow sinners. They're happening to bad people. And we know that. But that's not comfortable. And God, we want to be comfortable, so we scream and yell at you. Why? And then I was attracted to John chapter 9. Story of where the disciples and Jesus are on their way. They're traveling and they run across this man who is born blind. And the disciples look to Jesus and they're like, Lord, who sinned, his parents or him, to be born blind? And Jesus negates their question. And he says, neither. Let God be glorified. You see, what Jesus is teaching the disciples there is you're asking the wrong question. The question that you're posing does not matter to this man. All that matters is what's next. All that matters is action. The question that you're asking of why is not going to accomplish anything. It's not going to help build God's kingdom. It's not going to help you to be love, to do God's work, and to love your brother anymore. Jesus teaches them that you're asking the question of why when you should be asking the question, what? What would you have me do, God? What would you have this cause me to do? What action, what steps, what things? How would you have me respond? So we've been asking the wrong question all along when we're asking why. We should be asking what. But the issue with that is, for most of us, myself included, is that every time in my life that I have genuinely asked God, what would you have me do? It's rarely comfortable. And it's always going to call us to change. It's going to call us to action. And we don't want to do that. We like to live in our little comfort bubble. But if we genuinely want to do good and to be God's love to this world, that's the question. That's the prayer that we should be asking. So the question of why bad things happen to good people, we know. We know that the question, bad things happen because of free will. We know that the question in itself is wrong, that we are not good, we are sinners, we are rebels. But we also know the question does not matter because we're asking the wrong question. Would you pray with me? Dear God, so often we are confronted with tragedies that rip our world to shreds. Pains that are so deep that we can hardly breathe. And we scream to you, why? Lord, I ask that for those of us circled up in prayer right now with you that are going through things that we don't know what tomorrow's going to hold. We don't even know the next minute. The pain, the hurt, the fear. It's too much, God. Descend upon us, Lord. Help us to realize that we're screaming the wrong question. We're asking the wrong question. It does not matter the why. What does matter is what. What would you have me do? What would you have me do, Lord? What steps? What things? What action? And let us embrace that. Let us lean into you as you answer. Let us find comfort. Let us find encouragement. Let us find motivation for that prayer of what? To lead us to be the hands and feet of you in both big and small ways. Help us to scream what and not why. Lord, I lift up every brother and sister that's listening to this, that this prayer that you are speaking from my lips might be theirs. Thank you so much for loving us in a way that we don't deserve. Thank you. In your heavenly name, amen. God bless.